Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Paranormal Verses with myself, Kell and my co-host, Michael Koff. Today, I have the pleasure to welcome to the show Mike Heston Rogers, who was the witness to the famous fire in the sky incident from 1975. Which inspired the famous movie from 1993, Fire in the Sky. So basically, Mike doesn't really understand me a lot because for me being from the northern England, so I'm going to get my co-host to ask most of the questions. So I'm going to leave it to you, Mike. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, if you want me to, yeah, this is
Yeah.
Mike Rogers and Mike Heston Rogers. Yep, I'm here. She's already said what I am, what's important about me.
Yeah. I've obviously interviewed you before back in September last year, so it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Now I'll leave it up to Michael to ask you some questions.
Yep, and I have to say I am truly excited about this. I watched the interview last September, and I was like, "Oh man, I wish I could interview him." And when Kel said you were coming on, I was like, I got a little giddy. I will be honest. So one of the questions that I wonder if you've ever been asked is, what was life like in Arizona in '75? Were seeing UFOs and stuff in the sky normal or very rare?
Well, back then it wasn't like every day, but it was happening. Certainly a lot more than lately. In 5 years prior to the incident that Travis Walton and I and those other guys shared, we had another incident that was similar in nature. I say it was 5 years before. It was in 1970. We were in a different vehicle. We were driving in my Dodge Charger, and we were headed down to Phoenix. Travis Walton was sitting on the right side of the car, and I was driving. And there were four of my people, my family, in back. My wife was back there along with two of my sisters and my brother. And what happened was we had just come out of Snowflake there. It was dark. Sun had set for half hour or so prior, and so it was dark. But as we headed west, and that stretch of road leading out of Snowflake goes almost directly west for a long ways, 20, 30 miles. So right after we got out of Snowflake, I saw what I thought was a street light. It turned out to be a large lighted orb, and we kept driving and got closer and closer. I won't say everything about this. I'll just get through it to mention it, to bring it, because I had seen my first UFO a year or two prior to that incident. But that incident was very spectacular because when we finally got up close to where we could see it and we topped over a ridge, we could see it very clearly. And it was a sphere. It was somewhere around 100 feet in diameter. And it was very strangely colored. If you looked towards the center of it, it seemed to be purplish. But other than that, it was like orange, like yellow, white. And it was lighted from within, but it was not really loading up the ground. It was up in the air, and as we drove closer and closer to it, it was descending down. It was doing that quite slowly. It from the time we first saw it until the time it was gone was somewhere around 8 minutes altogether. So. We weren't the only ones that saw it. It turned out later we found other people that had seen it, so it was a witnessed event. And I have one particular fellow talking about him and several other football players in a bus who saw it, and he saw on tape. And then later there was three other fellows we ran into that had seen the same thing. I don't know how many others, but it was seen by a lot of people. Anyway, like I say, that was 5 years prior, and then, of course, the incident in 1975, November 5th, 1975. That was the big one for us, but it wasn't the only one. There was a lot of other people who'd seen a sphere like that, and other people had seen other objects. It was quite common at that time. Lately, there doesn't seem to be much activity at all in that area, in the northern Arizona area, to my knowledge, anyway. So that's to basically answer your question.
Wow, okay. So that paints a whole nother picture on it, because from the way the movie portrayed it, it looked like you all were shocked and stunned and
Oh, well, we were.
like
What happened 5 years before didn't change that.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, it's like you were like, and looked like this is the first time you've ever seen it, according to the movie. So it's nice to hear that it wasn't the first.
No, it wasn't. Now, it was for some of those guys. The rest of the crew, everybody except Travis Walton and myself, that was on the crew that day. It was that's another question I'm not completely aware of, but for each of those guys individually. But it was basically the first. I don't know whose dog that is.
That is mine. She shouldn't be talking.
Well, throw a shoe at him. Anyway, the rest of those guys certainly acted like it was the first time they'd ever seen anything, and very possibly was.
So that's really cool. So some reports say it was just like a blue light that you guys saw, and Travis got out to go investigate. Was it really a blue light, or
No. It wasn't blue at first. It was just a light, a yellowish light like the headlights of a vehicle or something. It was intermittently glimmering through the woods. A lot of coverage there. The trees pretty much covered the whole entire area. But we could see the light, and that was interesting us. And as we got closer to the incident, or closer to the site, then it became more and more clear until we finally broke into an opening where we could see it very clearly. The blue light thing comes from what hit Travis after he'd gotten out of the truck and walked up close to it, as close as he could get to it anyway. And he at one point decided that he wasn't doing anything, that what he was doing wasn't exactly a smart thing to do, and he decided to come back to the truck. And when he started to turn to come back, he was hit by a bluish green colored light that was extremely bright and very forceful. And when it hit him pretty much in the head and chest, and really impacted him very hard, knocking him back. His feet went back about 10 feet, but his head actually, because he's laying down by the time he hit the ground, his head was about 16 feet from where he was standing. So that was pretty hard blow there.
So he was actually knocked back, because I think in the movie it shows that he just stands there, his shoulders go back, and he goes
up. The movie didn't get much of anything right at all. I was very disappointed with that particular part. Actually, I'm pretty much disappointed with the whole thing, but that part was very different. And I don't think they needed to do it that way. They just, like Hollywood has this idea, it doesn't matter if it's a true story, they just have to screw with it. They got to change it. It's just the way they think.
Right.
They think they've got to have originality, even in a true story that isn't wanting any of that originality stuff. They want to know what actually happened. So the movie doesn't tell you what actually happened. It's a different concept entirely.
Right.
Almost entirely.
Another thing that I was reading and I was unclear about with all the stories that everyone's typed up is when you guys saw Travis go up, did anyone go to the sheriff and be like, hey, our friend was taken, or did you guys wait to be like, what did we just see? Is he really gone? Did somebody go to look to see if he just was?
Well, first of all, you use the phrase gone up. We didn't witness Travis going anywhere. I was driving the truck, and everybody was yelling at me to do what I actually did, and I hit the gas just as soon as he was hit like that. Well, within a few seconds after that, I hit the gas and took off down the road. So actually, it's something that a lot of people don't like to hear, but none of us witnessed his abduction at all. And there's a lot of people who have really gotten upset about that, because a lot of people just want us to have witnessed his abduction, and they just insist on it. And over the years, I've gotten upset myself about that, to the point to where I've made the statement very strong at times. We did not witness Travis Walton's supposed abduction. We took off down the road. There's no way we could have. And so you just have to take Travis's word for everything that happened after that.
Right. So.
And to finish your question, I think, of course, we didn't know what was happening. After we did a short search ourselves later, after we came back to the site, which of course the movie is completely different on that too. The movie shows the guys standing out there by the side of the road, and me the only one that goes back. That's not at all what happened. In actuality, the only truthful part of that is when I told everybody that I'm going back, and they can either stand by the side of the road or they can go with me. In reality, they all got back in the truck and went with me back to the site. But after we'd done that search and couldn't find him at all, that's when we had no idea what was going on, and that's when we went back into town and contacted the sheriff.
Okay, well, that makes more sense, actually.
Well, that's the real part of it.
So, one question I came up with that I find in my own head really curious about is, when you all saw the object in the sky that caused you to stop, did Travis elect to get out on his own and go out and see what was going on, or did you all talk amongst yourselves and say, "Hey, Travis, you're the closest. No, you go check it out"?
No, nothing like that. What happened was, just as soon as we broke into that clearing to where we could see it, nobody said anything to him. He didn't say anything to anybody. He just got out of the truck. In fact, I think he was out of the truck even before it came to a stop. And it was entirely his own doing to walk up to it. And nobody else in the truck decided to do that. Not anybody. Truck had 4 doors, so any of us could have gotten out and gone up with him, followed him up there or anything, but nobody did that. He's the only one.
Okay. We have a question from the chat room. Anthony Steen wants to know, do you think that the aliens have an agenda with humanity?
Yeah, I do, but it's not at all what other people think. What I think is going on is that they're basically trying to have as little to do with as possible, and that would make a lot of people say, "Oh, UFOs are everywhere." Well, in my opinion, no, they're not. 99% of what we see is something else. It's not UFOs. There's just so many people that want it to be true. They just insist it. So all they got to see is a light in the sky, and they've seen hundreds of UFOs just because of that one thing. They just exaggerate to beat hell, and I just don't know why people are that way. UFOs are definitely real, but they are not like people think they are. They're very few, and the agenda that the aliens have, in my opinion, of course, because I have no idea of knowing what they're actually thinking, is that they're grooming us for later times. They're getting us used to the concept, and apparently what they're doing is it's working in some ways, but in other ways it's not, because what little bit we've seen of UFOs seems to have screwed people's heads up for the most part, because people don't know or don't think what they should be thinking. People think that they know what's going on with UFOs. Most everybody has a pretty good concept of their own, and they're going to follow that, and nothing else matters to them. Reality just doesn't matter to most people. Most people just want to have reality be what they want it to be, and that's really one of the biggest things wrong with people, with the human race. Right. Everybody's biased. Everybody's biased. They don't give a damn about reality. All they care about is what they want it to be. That's my opinion.
And Kell and I have an interesting question is tying into that. So do you feel that the UFOs and aliens that are visiting us are interdimensional travelers, beings, or just in our own galaxy and just stopping by to say hi to their neighbors?
Well, I don't think they're dropping by to say hi. I think they, like I tried to say before, there was not that much involvement. The biggest part of what people as a whole think about aliens and UFOs is not what's really going on. It's just stuff they've all made up in their own minds. That's the stuff they want to believe instead of what is true. In my opinion, what is true is just a fragment of that. And what the agenda, as you called it, is they don't want to upset society any more than they need to. But what they do need to do, in my opinion, they are trying to adjust us to knowing that they exist. But that's about it. All the rest of that stuff is pretty much what people think or have decided on their own beyond what's really going on.
Right. So I'm kind of curious with seeing the events of November 5th, where Travis disappeared for a time. What impact did that have on you that night?
Have on me?
Right.
Well, it had quite an impact. The biggest impact I've ever had from anything in my life. I mean, that was a life-changing event, and it was for everybody there. Any way you want to look at it, it changed my life. I mean, there's nothing that would be the same after that.
Right. Could you elaborate a little bit on some of how it changed you? Because I think that's something people don't think about is, the impact on witnesses versus the people involved.
Well, it did things that I'm not happy with. My marriage with, the only marriage I ever had, to a lady that, mother of my 6 kids, or my first 6 kids, she just didn't believe it. And that had a bad effect on our marriage, and eventually ended a little over a year later. We ended in divorce. So that was pretty bad, and it's affected me ever since. And I'm sure that's part of what some of my kids have against me. They think that that's my fault, or there's something about it that is my fault. They take their mother's side, basically, and their mother, of course, hounds it in their head as to her side of things. But everything like that is that same way with most all divorces. The man has his point of view, and the woman has her point of view. Right. And the truth is somewhere in between, probably. But you could go from there and say everything in my life from there changed because of the things that did happen that changed. You'd have to get specific to really find something about it that would be the same at all. I mean, totally changed my life. That's the best I can say.
And I do think, though, that the way society treats people who are witnesses or, have experiences doesn't help in, the people who really have had experiences, because they're all pretty much gone through mockery, and it's like, I think that's a disservice. And so I'm truly sorry that had to happen to you. And
Yeah, that did happen. Happened to all of us guys. There for a long time, there was a 50% or more of the population that we dealt with, on a daily basis, didn't believe what we said, and that, of course, just made everything messed up for just about all of us. In fact, most of the guys left the area a few weeks after the incident. There was a while there that they had to stick around because of the requirements of the incident. The officials, things like the polygraph test that they wanted to do, and other things that we were being pressed for a long time there, made it impossible for some of those guys to leave as soon as they wanted to. But every one of them except for Travis and I left just as soon as they got the opportunity, and some of the guys left and basically hid. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want to talk about it, and they didn't want anybody asking them questions about it. And this is guys that all passed a lie detector test. And it didn't really seem to matter to a lot of people that we had all passed that lie detector test. Those who don't want to believe just aren't going to believe, and that's all there is to it in their mind. The same thing with believers. I mentioned a while ago bias, personal bias. People want to believe what they want reality to be, and they don't care about what reality actually is.
right.
I may be a little bit hard on people on account of that, but I've experienced so much bias over the years from believers and disbelievers alike that I've been driven to feel fairly harsh about it.
Oh, I can only imagine. So Anthony Steen is asking, did it affect you physically and emotionally? And I feel like we've kind of answered that, Anthony. If there's anything else you want to add to that question's answer.
Well, there wasn't any effects like any diminished abilities, or nobody got crippled or hurt physically. Not even Travis. If anything, the incident made us more aware than we would have been. That's one thing that a lot of people don't think about. We went through things there that caused us to be aware whether we wanted to be or not, more so than we would have been under normal circumstances. Something like that happens to you, it causes you to question everything. And that questioning causes you to know things that you wouldn't otherwise know. That's a simple way of saying it, but that's about what's going on.
Right. And if you don't mind, I'd like to piggyback about you talking about having to do the lie detector tests.
Yeah.
Did you all pass them and they still not believe you, or did they say you failed them even though you passed them?
All of the above. First of all, one of us didn't pass the test. There was 6 of us that took the test, and everybody passed except Alan Dallas. And later on, the examiner admitted on a TV show, that Alan actually passed the part of the test that he did take, but he had to call it inconclusive because it had to be perfect to be called conclusive. And so incomplete. He didn't say that he flunked. He just called it inconclusive because that's all he was left with. The reason for that is because Alan got very disturbed and at one point just became upset with the examiner for the questions he was asking. He got angry and his anger boiled over and he finally just got up and pulled the equipment loose, the various things that are hooked to him, and he threw it down and stomped out of there. But those tests are made up of 3 different segments, at least the ones we took. And Alan, just like the rest of us, took 3 tests, and then the first two run-through, did a run-through of the entire questions, the whole thing. It's just part of the examiner's need to make everything absolutely certain. is that he does all the questions, the entire test, 3 times over. And so what he was saying about Alan Dallas is that Alan passed the first 2 run-throughs of all those questions. The reason he didn't pass the last run-through is because he got up and stomped out.
Oh, I could hardly blame him. If you're asking the same thing over and over, that gets frustrating, I know.
Yeah, but you got to do that in order to take that test, and that was all explained to everybody before they even took the test. Just that Alan was worried that because he talked to us later, and he was worried that they were going to find out something that he didn't want them to find out about, because he was personally guilty of robbery. He never did learn who or what. I personally knew of Alan's ability to steal things, because one day, a few days, a couple of weeks before the incident, I noticed that my brother had parked a Super Bee, and it was all built up special and had these real special headers on it and stuff. It was a race car. And he had it in my backyard and expected me to basically oversee it, watch it, And then one day I come in the backyard to look, just basically look at things that like normal. And I looked, and his car hood was open. So I went in there and looked, and the headers off the car were gone. And those headers were worth a couple of $1,000, just those alone. And I instantly knew pretty much who took it. So I went looking for Alan. and Travis went with me, and my brother went with me, and we found Alan, and he first ran, and we chased him all through the town of Snowflake, and finally caught up to him, and because he stopped at a house, and he went inside the house, so we stopped there, and I got out and stood there in front of the car waiting. He finally came out of the house, and he had the headers with him, so he knew what I was after, and he threw those headers down at his feet and started cussing at me. And I didn't understand that at all. Why is he cussing me for? So I went over there and tried to get him to answer my questions about it. He wouldn't answer. He just kept calling me names. So I hit him, and then it went into a fight. And before too long, he was getting the worst of it. And he ran across the street and started yelling cuss words at me from across the street. What's funny about that is that night, he came to my house by surprise, and he apologized first. He says, "Man, I need this job, so I need the job." And I said, "Well, Alan, I didn't fire you. I just kicked your ass." If you're here in the morning, you can come to work with the rest of us like always. So that's what happened. And of course, the incident happened sometime later. Don't remember how long. Never took notice of that or took record of it, but it was a couple of weeks approximately.
So one thing I'm curious about is, I know the movie is not factually based. We've covered that. But what happened with Travis? Did he ever really say what happened where he was missing, and how did that affect his family? Was his wife understanding about it, or did she?
Oh, his wife didn't come about for about a year or so after the incident, and it just so happened that he married my sister, Dana. So he didn't have a wife at the time. But Travis is very explicit about what happened to him. In fact, he wrote a book about it called The Walton Experience, and I illustrated it for him, but that later became Fire in the Sky, and the movie, of course, along with that. But Travis can tell you in explicit detail exactly how he felt and exactly what happened, and a whole book's worth. It's all in his book, or one of his books. Either the Walton Experience, which came first, and then 15 years or so later is Fire in the Sky.
So is Dana still with him, or?
No. That's a long story, but basically speaking, no, they're not together. They're still married because Travis does not want a divorce. In fact, he's pretty much sound on it. She would have to take him to court to get a divorce. For some reason, she doesn't want to do that. But he has his own life. He has these girlfriends or girlfriend, and she has a boyfriend, and they're not living together anymore. In fact, they've been separated for probably 10, maybe 11 years by now.
And that's nothing to do with the incident.
No, not directly.
Okay. I was just curious if, like you were saying, your wife didn't agree with you if a year later.
Well, that's exactly the same with them. That's right. Or anybody, for that matter. Everybody has their own way of telling a story like that, you know, why somebody divorced, what happened. And it's the same with everybody I know.
Yeah. You've kind of touched on this one question I have, but I'm kind of curious more in detail of it, of when you hear of people reporting UFOs or, you know, hearing about reports of UFO in your area, does it, like, in your mind, do you, like, panic a little bit and be like, oh my God, is it happening again? Or are you more of, what's really going on and what's causing this to happen?
Well, I've had several things happen with me since then. To basically tell you what I've done, just, you know, to make sure you understand here. I've already told you about seeing my first actual UFO a couple of years prior. In other words, 1968, I'm pretty sure it was my brother and I. And then the incident in 1970 where we saw this large orb that came down out of the clouds and eventually shone a very bright light on the ground, lighting up an area like several football fields in size, and it goes back up in the clouds. This is all real quick here, just to get past it, because it was a whole incident. I could write a whole story about it and have actually, but anyway, 5 years later in 1975 is the incident with Travis Walton and us. In 1990. Actually 91, I believe. I had an incident when I was working up on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. Again, it's a whole story. Saw a large orb come very slowly over my camp, and I chased it and ended up lasted into the next day. And then there's been a few other things too, like for instance, I witnessed the Phoenix Lights, which everybody believes is a real thing. My way of looking at that, because I have documented the whole thing and gone through it all thoroughly and have looked and examined everything that exists concerning the Phoenix Lights, and I believe it was a government thing, a government origin for the purpose of seeing what the public will think about it all. And that's hard to understand just for me to say it that way, but I don't believe the Phoenix Lights had anything to do with UFOs. It was made to look like it was, but it wasn't. It wasn't a UFO. It wasn't any UFOs at all. And then the most recent thing that ever happened to me was in England in 1960. Well, I'll wait for that uproar to roll by. Anyway.
From England.
That's right. Maybe your dog heard me say that.
Yeah.
Anyway, in 1993, when the first time I went to England and got a chance to look at crop circles, and went back there several times. In 96, I'd gotten to the point to where I was, you know, to me, very interesting. I needed to know what crop circles were all about because they were very interesting, a very interesting subject, and a lot of people were making a lot of it. And I wanted to see for myself. Well, what I found out for myself, I was there 2 different seasons, 63, 64, And I mean, damn it, 93 and 94, and in 96, I went there again. I'd already by this time gotten with the Circle Makers. There's a group called the Circle Makers who are responsible for 50% or more of all these fantastic circles that are created every year. And they do it for a variety of reasons, mainly for money, because they're actually getting into advertising, and they make other circles other than that just out of interest to keep the whole thing going. And I thought that's what it was, but what caused me to quit doing that, to lose interest in the man-made part of it, was that I witnessed one night for myself a large green orb making a crop circle. It took about a minute for this orb to jump around and spin and make a crop circle, which startled me for the first time in years, really startled me bad, and had really changed my mind about crop circles, realizing that not all of them are man-made. Most of them are, but not all of them.
Wow.
So I left England, and I've never been back since. My last time. Now there's a lot of story to that too, but we don't have time here for all that.
Okay, and so that actually raises an interesting question. Maybe you can kind of highlight some simple ways to tell is, are there differences between the ones like you were saying that were man-made and those that were made by the UFOs?
Well, I haven't studied the entire field. I've gotten involved in the thing. Well, the things that I have gotten involved with, I've got very involved with, and that took all my time. When I was involved with crop circles there for several years, it took all my extra time and just to do that study. And prior to that, for instance, of course, it began with Travis. The thing with Travis's abduction. That was something that took several years, and to the extent that I really didn't get involved with much else, and I didn't believe much else. To the extent that I have learned of what else is going on, most of it I don't believe happened at all. I'm pretty much a skeptic in that respect, and like the Phoenix Lights. I got very involved in that. I spent several years studying that. All my spare time was spent studying the Phoenix Lights and everything involved with it, and came to the conclusion that nothing extraterrestrial has anything to do with the Phoenix Lights. There's a lot that have to do with it, but not extraterrestrial.
Wow.
And so, basically speaking, I don't have any real knowledge of the entire spectrum of UFOs, because that's a very large, wide spectrum. Right. There are thousands and thousands of reports and all that, and I've only studied just those things that involve me personally, not much else.
Right. I was more meaning, is there something like you look at it and go, oh, that looks like something that was man-made because of this?
Well, what
you were doing versus...
Yeah.
Wow, I can't explain how that was made.
Well, if you really wanted me to get into it, even though I don't know much of anything about any of this for facts, because like I say, I haven't studied this stuff, but just a basic concept I've gotten from these various other incidents is that aside from the fact that most of it is something else, misidentification, is some of it, a few things have been made by the government for the explicit purpose of seeing how people are going to react. And in my opinion, that was the Phoenix Lights. Other than that, there's other reasons for it that I don't know. But so part of the UFO field is basically man-made by various entities, such as the American government and others. There have been private people, in England, for instance. Kelly, you probably know about this time. This big UFO that was made and was delivered for the purpose of I don't know what the purpose was, making people think. They eventually knew it was a hoax, but get people to goat at first,
Yeah.
You know about that story?
There's been a few.
Yeah.
It's I think it's connected with something called Project Bluebeam, apparently. From what
Yeah.
I've heard.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not real thorough about it. I've just read about it here and there.
Yeah.
Haven't investigated. Yeah. One story was placed right alongside an article I put in the what do you call it? UFO magazine.
The MUFON one?
Yeah, MUFON. Yeah. I still lost me there for a minute. I have an article in the May issue 3 years ago about the Phoenix Lights. And this story of this thing in England, this big UFO is blue and silver and like that. It was kind of a huge hot air balloon, basically. That was along in the same article. Not the same article, but very close to the one I wrote. That's where I got that from.
Interesting.
Okay. To backtrack, we got a question from Marianne Johnson. We kind of talked about this earlier, but she wants to know if you'll elaborate on what happened when you turned around and went back to see what happened to Travis that night.
Okay, well, this has been told many times, but what happened was after we'd gone down the road, not quite a quarter of a mile really, but nearly a quarter, everybody got out of the truck. I got out of the truck because you couldn't see behind the truck without getting out, other than the rear view mirrors, which were broken. One of them was broken and the other one was bent. And basically you couldn't see anything out of anything. So we had to get out, and that's why we got out. That's why I got out. When I got out, the rest of the other guys started getting out until all of us were out. And we all convened in front of the truck, in front of the headlights. Just kind of a natural way of having things happen. Go in the light, But while we were moving from where we were, getting out of the truck to a place in front of the headlights, me and several of the other guys looked back. That's the first thing on our mind, was to look back that direction. And we saw a light raise up through the forest and streak off towards the northeast. Therefore, in my mind, it was the object that we had seen. That was exactly what it was, to my way of looking at it. And that's what the other guys thought too. But to me, that meant that it was gone. And so there was no more fear of going back. That's why I wanted to go back right away. And that's basically why everybody went ahead and got in the truck. Because it had apparently left. So everybody got in the truck. And we had everybody was talking there from the time we stopped the truck until we got back in the truck and were headed down the road. It was a frenzy of chatter, talk and argument, and just 6 guys just talking constantly. And we quit. That slowed down because as we got closer to the site, it got more hushed because we were getting near where it happened. And I finally pulled the truck up into the clearing there to where the light shone as far as I could get it up in the clearing. It didn't shine right where Travis was, but close to it. And at that point, I had another thing to say. Well, I'm going to get out and look around for Travis. You guys can stay in the truck. You can go look too. Everybody got out of the truck and went to look for Travis. And we looked around there, but it was dark out there, and the headlights didn't give us a lot of light. Very large area, to cover. And we had one flashlight, but we weren't holding hands or anything, but we were basically shoulder to shoulder all the way around through there. And we searched for 10 to 15 minutes, covering the entire area and off back into the woods quite a ways out of the clearing. And that's basically what happened. Of course, we didn't find anything. At one point, after we had come to the realization that we couldn't find anything, I broke down. I actually went down to my knees, and people have always thought of me as just being a crybaby or something. But I tell them, my main reason why I was actually sobbing was because we didn't find Travis. It wasn't because of thinking that he had been hurt or killed or anything. It was because we didn't find him, which meant he was probably okay. And that was the main reason for my emotion at that point. The other part of it was the fact that it was a very emotional experience, the whole thing, and I wasn't the only one that had tears in my eyes. But I don't want to say certain names who just insist that they were the bravest person ever. Well, they know who they are, and they've made a lot of it. But we won't mention that. Anyway, that's what happened from the time we were up the road until we got back, basically.
So one thing I'm kind of curious on is, like we've stated that the movie is not exactly accurate. Is how long was it really before Travis showed up again and everybody was like, "Hey, Travis is back"?
Well, it wasn't that simple. We had the lie detector test during that one whole day. It took all day long from fairly early in the morning. I think it was 8 o'clock until probably 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening before it was all finished. That took up that day. Travis showed up on the highway outside Heber earlier the next day, and he showed up on the highway and noticed, where he was, and could see the town from where he was, and so he took off running down into Heber and went and called his brother on the phone from the phone booth there. But what was the rest of the question?
Oh, I was just asking, like the movie makes it look like it was like days, maybe a week that he was missing. How?
He was gone for 5 days and 6 hours altogether. From as best we can figure. But nobody saw him that night. The first people that saw him was his brother, but that was a couple of hours after Travis had gotten down into Heber and called his brother. And only then did his family, his brother and his mother and, I don't know, one of his other brothers knew about it. Nobody else knew anything about it for another several hours or a day. Myself, I didn't hear anything about it until later that day, in the evening of that day. And I don't think anybody else heard anything about it either. And I didn't see Travis for another couple of days after that. I had to go down to Phoenix where he had been sequestered to his brother's house down there in Tempe, Arizona. Or not Tempe, but one of those small towns close, part of the city of Phoenix there. I had to go down there to even see him. And so altogether it was like 2.5, 3 days from the time he was back until I was able to speak to him.
Right. And so you mentioned you did illustrations for his book. Where did you get the inspiration for the aliens and everything?
Well, it's just something that I started working with Travis. I was the one that told him, you got to write a book about this. This is dynamite stuff for a book. He wasn't. I had to basically talk him into it because he wasn't hot on the idea at first. I told him I wanted to illustrate it. He didn't think I could illustrate. I told him, well, we can do the best we can, okay? And so it took him quite a while. It took him several months to get up whatever it took. He had writer's block for a while. And after he finally got cleared of that, then he got busy on it. And then he started doing better after that and wrote that first book, and I illustrated the first book. There are 10 illustrations altogether. I did 5 to illustrate the first book, and then when Fire in the Sky came along, I did 5 more illustrations to illustrate that one. And so 10 illustrations altogether are in Fire in the Sky.
Right. I just asked because I've seen the illustrations you're talking about, and I've seen them by other people too. And so I was just
Right, yeah.
going,
Travis,
wow, these are similar.
well, yeah, the guy that Travis got to do it, apparently the guy was volunteered. It wasn't going to cost anything. And the guy took off and started doing them again. So Travis, of course, used them, and he, I think, one of the new versions of his book has these illustrations in it that this other guy, I can't remember the guy's name. He's got a weird name. I can't remember it, but up until like a year ago, all the books had my illustrations only.
Okay.
So I don't know I haven't even seen the latest copy of his book, so I don't know anything about that.
Okay, I was referring to the one with the blue suits and the blonde hair.
Oh, well, I did that illustration.
Yeah, that's the one that I saw, and I was like, I've seen that in other places, so I thought that was really cool.
Well, people have copied it. It's been copied several times by various people. Mine was the original and the best, I think, but every time I get on the net and for some reason get into illustrations and I get into my stuff, there's the site I went to had a number of different illustrations that were copying my illustrations, but they were done by various people. I don't remember the name of any of them. But there's lots of them out there. I probably haven't seen them all.
Oh, the internet's so vast, I doubt we ever will.
Yeah. And of course, people have written Travis's book. Had been written by other people, more than one. Then several people wrote the story pretty much to just copy the story. I don't know if Travis ever took any of them to task, or not. If a copyright infringement. I learned that copyright infringement is a hard thing to get any results from in court, because you have to go to too much extent to actually prove that because there's certain things that have to be proven. You have to prove intent and whether money was made and other things like that. And all said and done, it's a hard deal to try to take somebody to court for copyright infringement and get anything out of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm kind of curious, do you and the crew that was in the truck still get together and talk, or have you guys kind of parted ways and just two of us have been dead now for like 10 years. So a little bit hard to get together, with everybody. And the other person was somebody I wanted to mention here was Ken Peterson. I haven't seen him for 6 years. Travis saw him at a screening of the documentary that was made by a lady, Strauss, and they did a screening down in Phoenix, even though it was not on film, but it was a disc movie. But that was an event where Travis was there and he spoke, and they played the movie and everything. And it was called Travis. The name of it is Travis. And Travis says that he saw Ken Peterson in the group in the audience after the show, or whatever you call it, was done. He saw him there, but he wasn't able to talk to him, and that's the last time he saw him, and that was about 3 years ago. So, I would really seriously like to know whether Ken Peterson is still alive or where he is, because I saw him 6 years ago up here on the mountain, and he was here, and I saw quite a bit of him. I visited him like once a week or more often. And then one day I went to where he had been living, and he wasn't there. And his phone number didn't work. Of course, it was a cell phone, and he probably went to Tucson, and for some reason it didn't work there. I don't know what the deal was, but I don't know what happened to Ken. And I haven't heard anybody that knows anything about him. He has a lot of family up here, several people, Petersons up here on the mountain.
And I've asked two of them, and they don't know anything about where he is or what he's doing or whether he's still alive or not. So it's a really strange to me. It's very strange. And I would really like to know where Ken is if he's still alive. Like a little bit of closure on this, you know?
Right.
Alan Dallas and Dwayne Smith died a long time ago. But John Gillette and Steve Pierce and Travis and I are still around. So the four of us that are still around for sure, no, there hasn't been any get-together. There has, you know, like John and Steve get together now and then. I've heard this. I'm not sure they do when they have last, but they do here and there because they're both truckers, you know, drive big trucks. And Travis goes to the conferences, and I think he said that John went with him to one of those events. As for me, the last I had to do with Steve and John was a radio show here about a year and a half ago, radio show, and that was the last I'd seen of them. Since then, I've talked to Steve or texted him, you know, on Facebook and stuff several times, but nothing recent, nothing in the last few months. It'd be a little hard. It'd be a little hard for us to get together these days. It'd be something. Would be a good thing to do, but it just hadn't happened.
So, would you be interested if somebody was to approach you and say, "Hey, we want to make a true, factual-based movie on the fire in the sky"? Or
Travis is already into that. He's got some people. I don't know who they are. I don't know much about it except what he's told me. But I personally can't see anybody investing any money like Paramount did, you know, because Fire in the Sky was a fairly large production. It had an all-star cast. They paid out a lot of money there for the people that were, you know, like James Garner and D.B. Sweeney, Robert Patrick, who played my part. There was like 7 or 8 people altogether that had to pull down a pretty good sized chunk of money from that, and plus it was a big production and done in a big way.
Right.
And I can't see that happening again. Not right away anyway. Maybe after we're all dead and everything, they could call it some sort of a historical event or something, you know. But for right now, I don't think there's going to be any remake of anything. Not like that anyway. Not like Hollywood did with Fire in the Sky.
Right. But if they were, who would you want to play your part?
Oh, I haven't even really thought about that. Robert Patrick did a really good job in Fire in the Sky. And, of course, I had a lot to do with him after that, and during that time and whatnot. We went around like Geraldo and Good Morning America and all those things, a number of those things there for quite a while. Robert Patrick and D.B. Sweeney were originally scheduled, they told me, to do the promotional event in throughout the world, you know, Australia and Rome, London, and Japan, and wherever. And it turned out they hired Travis and I to do it instead. And so we did the world tour.
Wow.
Which was a pretty big deal. That was very interesting. We got treated like movie stars there for quite a while, several months.
I bet that was fun.
Yeah, it was fun, actually. They spent a lot of money on us.
So
It made me feel kind of self-conscious about it because it didn't seem right. I'm not a movie star, you know, but they spent money on us like we were. I mean, they gave us the best hotels wherever we went, like in Australia. I looked at the bill on one of those. It was like $1,200 for a 2-day stay at this one hotel.
Wow.
And plane tickets, like on those 747s, those were into the $1,400 or so for round trip ticket to LA. Stuff like that. Lots of money involved, and I couldn't see that. But Paramount apparently has a different idea. Apparently they get their money back or they wouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody's asking, is there any physical proof where the craft was after the incident?
Well, it depends on what you call proof. I noticed that the trees in that area were growing much faster than they should have. And that was investigated by several people, and I mapped it all out and took core samples and stuff like that. And if you go to Travis's book, you'll find all that information in his book. There was a peak in growth. It started out almost immediately the very next summer from the incident, and it amounted to a substantial, an unbelievable amount of growth, a rate of growth for several years afterwards. And then there was a fire that went through, which wiped it all out.
I wonder if the fire was natural or they were trying to cover it up.
Well, it was part of a huge fire that started many, many miles away from there, so it had to be a part of the fire, the big fire that happened through there. It's called the Rodeo Chetasky fire because it actually was two different fires that started pretty much the same day and grew so big that they grew together, and so they became one fire.
Oh.
And at the time, it was the largest fire that ever happened in Arizona. And 2 years later, they had a fire on the other side of the mountain, which pretty much, I think it became the biggest fire by a few hundred acres. But between them, they took out a whole lot of timber, and so the forest around this area, the whole entire northern Arizona, really is very different from what it used to be.
Right. So we're actually at our hour. We're actually a couple minutes over, but we have a couple more questions if you're.
Yeah, okay. I can hang around for a little bit.
So the two questions we have are more of your opinion on current events, not anything to do with the fire in the sky incident.
I haven't even kept up with UFOs any time recently, so I just couldn't even comment on that, except to say that, I don't check it out. I don't even follow it on the net. I don't watch any programs on TV. I just pretty much let it go. I've seen enough myself over in my lifetime that I know what's going on, or at least visually, and and how it's affected me and how it's affected the world. But as far as keeping up with all this stuff, and the reason I don't is because most of it is just misidentification or outright hoax.
Right. So, kind of touching on that is, do you think the government will ever come totally clean on the alien disclosure, like Project Blue Beam, Blue Book?
Blue Book.
That?
I don't think they're able to come clean. I don't think they know anywhere near as much as people think they do. This concept of the government knowing all kinds of stuff, what they do know would surprise you. Like the Phoenix Lights, I believe that what you call the first event, the first object that was spotted and flew over Arizona, I believe that was deliberately created by the government, and it was very large. But it was not had anything to do with extraterrestrials. It was for the purpose of affecting the community, the town, the city of Phoenix, and the area, of Arizona affected by it. I saw it for the first time early in the day when the sun had just barely set, and I saw it from a hilltop in Prescott, Arizona. And I followed it after it went over, and I followed it down till I got close enough to where I saw it go over South Mountain and disappear down south. Just to make that story short.
Okay. No, that's fine. I appreciate your honesty. And the other thing is, I'm sure you probably have heard of, recently we're having unidentified objects in the skies that are being shot down over the border or over the ocean in Alaska, Montana, South Carolina. Do you think those are UFOs and they're just telling us they're balloons, or are they?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with it, and I don't watch it. I don't watch it on any program or TV or anywhere. I pretty much have certain things that I'm doing lately, and I stick to that. I don't have time for anything else. And like I said, I've already seen enough in my life. I've had a number of experiences, and those are enough.
No, that's understandable, and I can understand that. I was just curious if you seen it in the paper or if you had a
No,
thought about it.
no. Like I say, I believe that most everything we see is misidentification or a deliberate hoax. Maybe even a hoax on the part of the government. They're not infallible. You know, they do things like that. And so I just can't say. I have no idea what these things are lately.
Yeah. So you talking about projects that you're working on? Is there anything you can share with us about those, or are they still in?
Well, I illustrate and stuff. One thing I wanted to mention is that of those 10 paintings that I originally did to illustrate Travis's books, only part of those have been sold. Those are all for sale. And in fact, there's 4 remaining, and I haven't advertised that anywhere, but I'll do it now. Basically, you know, if somebody wants to contact me, if they want any interest on any of those, they can contact me on Facebook through, through the text portion there. They can contact me in the private conversation and go from there.
All right.
The other thing is that I still do this periodically whenever somebody requests it. Of those 10 illustrations that I have, I'm willing to autograph, an illustration and a copy of it anyway, a print. I do some of that, so those are available, as well as the paintings, which are still available. I have sold several of those. They've been ranging in price around $1,500 each, but one fellow bought 2 of them, and that was $3,000. But I'm sure he's satisfied with it. You were talking about that alien, the aliens in blue, the blonde hair and stuff.
Right.
That particular painting was one of the 2 paintings that he bought. But the covers to the Walton Experience, the illustration to it, and the Fire in the Sky are both still available, and they're still available to be bought if somebody wants them.
Excellent.
So, are you selling the paintings themselves?
Yeah, they're the actual paintings.
Copies?
They don't belong to me. I sold them all. Gosh, it's been 9-10 years ago. I sold them all to a guy, and he's willing to get rid of all of them. But so far we've only sold I think it's either 4 or 5, and some of the best, in my opinion, are still remaining to be sold. I just haven't pushed that. There's nothing on my page, and I don't have any other sort of social media to advertise on.
Right. Well, that's what we're here for. So you heard it here, folks. You can buy art from Mike Heston Rogers. You can find him on Facebook. Private message him. So good luck in selling those. And are there any other experiences you've had that you care to share, or you?
Well, I've just very basically, I haven't told anything here except to just basically tell the things that has happened. Other than that, just like seeing lights in the sky. I've seen those sorts of things here and there. Not in abundance, but here and there I've seen things in the night sky. That seems to be a fairly common thing. People see a light moving erratically, doing things in the sky. That's something I've seen a couple of times. But what I've talked about here is basically everything that I personally experienced. There's been a lot of it, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, when you say you look up and see lights in the sky, I've talked to a lot of people who say they've witnessed lights in the sky and UFOs, and they say they get a feeling like they need to look up. Is that what happens with you, or you just happen to look up and see them?
Yeah, that's happened a couple of times. Uh, and other times it just seemed to be just a chance sighting, just something that happened. It's just there and you see it. You didn't do anything. Nothing drew you to it specifically. I mean, what happened with Travis Walton? Everybody in the trucks saw light glimmering through the trees, which got bigger and closer, and but there was nothing alluring about it, nothing that drew us to it. Nothing except a light, sparkling light, which itself is enough to draw attention.
Yeah, so that's cool affirmation and validation for those that say they get the feeling. So that's really cool because I've had the same thing. I'll get a feeling like I need to look up and I'll see something unusual. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed this evening, this afternoon.
Yes, as have we. And
Yep.
so I think with it being about almost an hour, 12 minutes, I think we're at a good point to where we can wrap it up. And you're welcome if you have anything come up that you want to share or talk about, you can reach Kell or I, and we'll have you back on the show if you'd like.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, it's usually somebody else's idea that I do this. But if I do have an experience that I want to share, I'll do that.
Well, we appreciate you doing that, and we appreciate you spending your afternoon with us.
Yeah, and I just want to point out again, anybody that's listening or watching, that Mike is actually looking for a friend of his,
Yes.
Kenneth Peterson. If anybody knows of his whereabouts, I think it's in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah, he's probably in Tucson.
Yeah.
If he's still alive. He was in bad health 6 years ago, so it's very possible that something happened to him and his family just doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if anybody's got any information about where he is or if he's passed or anything, can they please let us know or let Mike know?
Yes, please.
Yes, you can reach, if you can't find Mike on Facebook, you can reach Kell or I, and we can pass the message on to Mike for you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Also, I'm just letting everybody know again, the reason why I haven't spoke much is because my accent's pretty strong, and obviously Mike doesn't understand every single thing I say, so I've just left it to Michael tonight to ask all the questions. But it's been an absolute wonderful show yet again.
Well, I'm glad to have been here.
Very happy to have you.
Yes. All right. So you ready, Kell?
Yeah, just want to say thanks to everybody for watching Paranormal Versus yet again. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another show. Who we got on next time, Michael?
Good question. You caught me in the middle of something. We have Heather Lay coming on.
Okay. So that'll be in 2 weeks' time. We'll put up the adverts for that. And again, I want to say thank you to Mike for coming on again. And if he wants to hang on until after the show, we can have another chat. But I want to thank everybody again for watching. It's been an absolutely amazing show. But
Yes.
do you want to close up, Mike?
I was just going to say thank you to everyone in the chat room that asked questions and participated. Thank you as always. And thank you again, Mike, for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Very good. I was glad to do that and put the word out about my friend Ken Peterson.
Yeah.
Hope I get some response on that. But thank you, guys. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Yes. So from Paranormal Versus to all of you, we hope you had a great Valentine's Day. Happy Mardi Gras. And happy adventures. Good night, everyone.
Good night.